Peat Sorb's voracious appetite for oils and other hydrocarbon-based liquids makes it a superior industrial absorbent that is quickly gaining market share through a growing network of distributors worldwide. An all-natural, environmentally friendly product, Peat Sorb repels water and virtually instantly absorbs 8 times its own weight in oils and other liquid hydrocarbons. Marketed by Sorbit Technologies Incorporated of Toronto, Canada, Peat Sorb recently underwent its most challenging test to date, a 2.7 million liter oil spill off the Atlantic coast of Brazil. On May 15, 1994, this nearly 2-foot diameter crude oil pipeline along the coast of Brazil ruptured, spewing forth 2.7 million liters of oil into the environment. While the oil damage to the immediate vicinity of the rupture was swift and readily apparent, the real threat was created when the bulk of the spill flowed into the Atlantic Ocean. By May 16th, these huge oil slicks, here seen from an altitude of 1,200 feet, were moving northward up the coast, threatening beautiful Baracacaba Beach in Sao Sebastião. The worst fears were realized when the oil began washing up on this pristine beach. This is Baracacaba Beach on the morning of May 17, 1994, virtually covered with the thick black goo. The beach had received the brunt of the oil spill's damage and its threat to the area's ecosystem. Overnight, it had become an environmental disaster of potentially enormous proportions. The immediate loss of the beach for bathing and recreational use was just the tip of the iceberg. The ecologically sensitive beach contains myriad species of small marine life that form an essential element in the region's ecosystem. By now, Brazil's Secretary of the Environment, CETESB, officials of Petrobras, the national oil company, along with marine biologists, environmental experts, and technical staff, were on site to tackle the disaster. Everyone was in agreement. The oil must be removed quickly, at any cost, if long-term damage to the ecosystem was to be avoided. Men and machinery were mobilized immediately to begin the cleanup. Meanwhile, the oil continued to arrive from the sea. If Baracacaba Beach was to be saved, it would require an all-out effort and demand a greater degree of success than had been achieved in so many other oil spills around the world in recent years. Frantic attempts to encircle the oil slip offshore with retaining booms had begun the day before in a hope of preventing the oil from reaching the beach. Although some oil was retained offshore, it was not nearly enough. The battle moved to the beach. Attempts were made to pump the oil off the water's surface at the shoreline, but again, this effort was largely futile. Mechanical scraping and removal using bulldozers commenced, but when CETESB officials and marine biologists became aware that what was being removed was 20% oil and 80% sand containing sensitive marine life, this large-scale scraping was immediately halted. Throwing the baby out with the bathwater was certainly not the answer. Meanwhile, the oil-laden surf arrived relentlessly, depositing foul-smelling goo everywhere, and appeared to be winning the battle. Despite all attempts, the oil was accumulating over everything, and it was clear that other methods had to be used to make any headway at all. The consistency of the oil and its interaction with both water and sand presented a formidable challenge in attempting separation and removal. Visible marine life was being devastated, and it was clear that the threat to the ecosystem was growing as the oil accumulated. A workforce of 500 men was quickly mobilized, and on May 17th, a massive assault on the oil-covered beach was launched. With wooden scrapers, shovels, wheelbarrows, and 45-gallon drums, this army of laborers attempted to scrape up the oil and remove it. Unfortunately, this effort did not address the unique physical characteristics of oil and the difficult challenge of collecting it. The scraping attempt might be compared to an effort to rake water. It did little more than just move the oil around. In addition to the government and oil company officials who watched this activity with increasing dismay, there was another keen observer. Dr. Eduardo Cortez, Sorbit Technologies' Brazilian distributor for Peat Sorb. After discussing the situation with Secretary of Environment Regina Helena de Paiva Ramos and key officials from Petrobras, Dr. Cortez is asked to give a demonstration of Peat Sorb's capabilities. The demonstration would be given early the next morning with key officials present. At 7:30 a.m., Dr. Cortez begins the demonstration at the north end of the beach by applying a layer of Peat Sorb to heavily oil-laden rocks. The instant action of Peat Sorb had begun absorbing the inch-thick coating of sludge, and moments later, Dr. Cortez scraped the oil-laden Peat Sorb aside to reveal a clean rock. The officials were surprised at the speed with which Peat Sorb had worked, and were even more amazed at how thoroughly it had absorbed the oil. They could now appreciate that the method of removing the oil had to address its unique properties, and it became readily apparent to all that Peat Sorb was able to do so, and quickly. The demonstration was expanded with the application of Peat Sorb along the water's edge, on both the oil-covered sand and on the oil-laden surf. Once again, Peat Sorb's voracious appetite for hydrocarbons was instantly apparent, at which point Petrobras officials, with full support of CETESB, decreed that the entire cleanup program would be immediately refocused using Peat Sorb under the direction of distributor Dr. Cortez. Petrobras placed an order for many tons of Peat Sorb, which Dr. Cortez had wisely arranged to be close at hand. Large quantities of Peat Sorb began arriving within minutes, and the workforce was employed in spreading the absorbent along the length of Baracacaba Beach. It was also spread upon incoming oil-laden surf, where it could begin absorbing the oil before reaching the sand. Positive results were immediate, and just minutes after the application of Peat Sorb, the crew was able to commence raking up the oil-soaked absorbent. Unlike the futile attempts to rake up oil, the job of raking up saturated Peat Sorb was straightforward, not unlike raking up coffee grinds or sawdust. The raking reveals clean sand and a strong testimony to Peat Sorb effectiveness in absorbing all of the oil. Officials then surveyed the progress later the same day, as a second application of Peat Sorb, now saturated with oil, is removed for environmentally friendly disposal. Petrobras officials, marine biologists, and environmental experts, including the Secretary of Environment, all agree that Peat Sorb cleanup is an unqualified success in averting a potentially enormous and long-term environmental catastrophe. But no one is more pleased than Sorb Technologies distributor Eduardo Cortez, as he proudly surveys the sandy beach and dips his hand into the clean water and sand where, just hours before, many tons of threatening black goo lay. In a single day, 2 applications of Peat Sorb have virtually restored Baracacaba Beach to its natural state. Smaller amounts of Peat Sorb were applied to sporadic arrivals of oil from the sea during the next week, and shortly thereafter the entire area was reopened for public use and enjoyment. Peat Sorb is used countless times per day around the globe to clean up all manner and size of hydrocarbon spills. Factory floors, refineries, auto service centers, airports, and highway mishaps all find Peat Sorb's capabilities to be superior to competitive absorbents. But in terms of magnitude and the environmental threat, Baracacaba Beach was our biggest challenge and most demanding test. Peat Sorb passed that test admirably with flying colors.